We're told what to do, we've weight to carry. We're a camel. And at a certain stage, the camel wanders into the desert. You will know if you're in that stage. When the camel is in the desert, a transformation happens. The camel becomes a lion. Now, the difference between a camel and a lion is quite obvious. A lion has a character, it has a determination, it has an ego. It's an individual. The lion wanders around the desert for some time until it meets a dragon. And the dragon has many, many scales on the dragon. And written on each scale of the dragon it says, "Thou shalt," you will. The lion fights the dragon. A great battle happens in the middle of the desert. Now, if the dragon wins, the lion goes back and becomes a camel. If the lion wins, it goes on and transforms into a child. A child is innocent. A child is fresh, a child is creative. How excited are we? I'm going to draw as I speak, along 10 meters of paper. This is wallpaper. Each roll of wallpaper comes in rolls of 10 meters. That's why it's called 10 meters of thinking. I begin many of my presentations with the following. Success is not a point. Success is a path. Success is not a point, success is a path. And along that path, there are many different events that happen. And what we discover as we move along that path is that these events are actually connected. Hence, we create this symbol. It's an ancient Celtic symbol. It's in many cultures. It's a symbol that represents unity. Everything is connected. It represents diversity because there's different points. And it represents eternity, because no matter where you start, you're going to come back to the same place. No matter where you begin and what path you follow, you'll come back to the same place. So, to understand a little bit more about my background, you need to understand a little bit about Irish logic. Now, Irish logic is as follows. This is a forest, as you can clearly see. And in that forest, there's an Irish guy, this here, as you can clearly see, is an Irish guy called Patrick Murphy. And he was with his Dutch friend. I live in Amsterdam, I can make fun of the Dutch. They're great people. So the Irish guy and the Dutch guy are walking along the forest, chatting away, until suddenly, from behind a tree, out comes a bear. Now, as you can clearly see, this is a bear. Okay, this is a bear, right? So this is a bear. So out comes the bear, and the bear starts running towards them. And the Irish guy's freaking out, freaking out. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? The Dutchman's very, very relaxed. Takes off his backpack. From out of his backpack, he takes out a pair of running shoes. And he starts putting on his pair of running shoes. Now, the Irish guy says, "What are we doing? What are you doing? You can't outrun a bear." And the Dutchman says, "I don't need to outrun the bear, I just need to outrun you." Now, Unfortunately, we all too often operate within a model of competition. This goes throughout every aspect of our current society. Education, academia, medical care, etc., etc. We're operating within a limited frame of competition. We need to find alternatives to this. And there are many alternative pathways. Unfortunately, however, science is still all too often working with the traditional model. So this here is a butterfly, as you can clearly see. And science is working all too often with the idea of you catch the butterfly, kill it, and then study it. That was the traditional model of science. Analysis, separation, categorization. We could ask ourselves, is that the model that we want to continue with? So, we then step into the world of relationships between organizations and clients. And you'll understand this story. You're in a room. And in that room is a cougar. And this is a cougar, as you can see. A cougar is a very vicious animal, right? And next to the cougar is a cobra. This is a very vicious animal, cobra. Cobra is quite feisty, that's why it's a cobra effect. And there's a cougar, there's a cobra, and there's a client. You've got a gun with 2 bullets. Who do you shoot?
Client with 2.
The client twice. There's something wrong, ladies and gentlemen, with our world. Operating within a frame of competition, limiting. Operating towards others in an aggressive way. There's something wrong with our world if this is what we're doing. We have a call to adventure. Our call to adventure asks us to do something different. And there's a new mathematics. The new mathematics is 1 plus 1 equals 1. The new mathematics says 1 plus 1 equals 2. The new mathematics says 1 plus 1 equals 3. You guys get this. The new mathematics says 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals
European Youth Award.
European Youth Award, 111. We have gone beyond synergetic capabilities. We're actually in exponential network capabilities. This is the potential of what you guys are doing. Very exciting. It's a call to adventure. It's a call to do something different. It's a call to take action. That action needs to be based on an understanding that the world, and this is the world, as you can clearly see. That's Ireland, by the way, the center of the world. The world has 2 forces acting on it simultaneously. There is a force of deconstruction, a force of disunity. And most of our media coverage is telling us that. Simultaneously, there is another force, a unifying force. a force that is bringing things together. This force isn't mentioned enough in the media. These forces are acting simultaneously at every aspect of society. Two forces. Which force are you contributing to? We don't need more disintegration in this world. So, growing up in Ireland, we're outside a lot, got a lot of different adventures, and one of the adventures was with my dog, whose name was King. And King used to chase cars up and down our road. A very dangerous habit. Until one day, he was actually hit by a car. Now, we took him to the vet, and very quickly, the vet was able to heal him, and he was okay. And then he had one of these things around his neck, you know, that made the color of shame, that made his bark louder. You know. And shortly after that, he recovered. And it was remarkable. He learned really quickly. He learned really quickly never to chase cars on that road again. Instead, he chased them on this road. Learning. There's two modes. You have first level learning and you have second level learning. First level learning is where you learn within the same system. Second level learning is where you learn about the system. That's where change and transformation happens. This is the best of times and it is the worst of times. It is the worst of times because, ladies and gentlemen, this here is you. And our journey is not forwards. Our journey is not backwards. Our journey, ladies and gentlemen, is inwards. We need to be the transformation in the world. It is not for the politicians to make the world a better place. It is for each and every one of you to make that internal change. And I've had some fantastic conversations already over breakfast with people who are doing this. So, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. What are we going to do about it? It's really simple. I'm going to give you the magic weapon. The magic weapon is the strategy that I repeatedly give to organizations. This is the only strategy I ever use in organizations. It's as follows. There was a gentleman called Tom Peters, who's a great management guru way back. And he wrote a book called In Search of Excellence. Wonderful book. You don't have to read it because I'm going to summarize it here. Wonderful book. And he took companies that were excellent and companies that were not excellent, and he says, well, what's the difference? And there was one pattern that struck me most in this, and the pattern is as follows. Companies that were not excellent did. Companies that were not excellent did. Ready, aim, fire. Companies that were excellent did. Fire, ready, aim. What's the difference? Sorry? You're going for it. Living now, taking a chance, going for it. What we have here is we have action, reflection, refinement. Organizations in today's world are working with what they call adaptive strategies. Adaptive strategies means that the world is changing faster than we can realize or can predict, and therefore we have to learn by doing. This is the strategy to follow. Go way back in the 1980s, before most of you guys were born.
Thank you very much.
Back in the 1980s, Coca-Cola had an amazing idea. They said, hey, why don't we change the flavor of our Coca-Cola? They did a lot of research on this. Then they went into test groups, research methodologies, and everybody had said, yes, let's do this. And then they launched it for millions. And what happened?
What?
It flopped. It almost was the end of Coca-Cola as we know it. And then they tried to catch up. They lost millions in this. They tried to catch up and then go back to classic cola and so on and so on. That is the old-fashioned way of doing it. Compare that to Japanese soft drink company. Japanese soft drink company creates 30 flavors of cola, launches them into the Tokyo market for a 3-month period, reflects on what happens. 3 of them actually sold. They refine those 3, repeat the process.
Are they allowed to roll it up in the back there?
No, you have to let it drop off the edge. So if you get that on film as well, that'd be fantastic. The summary of this, what this results in for me is the strategy that I give to every organization is as follows. Act. Take a chance. Act. Upon that action, reflect as quickly as possible. You guys are in the digital world, you can do that instantaneously. From that reflection, you then enhance the reflection by consulting with others. I'm going to speak more about that a little bit later. You consult with others, you open it up, you get other feedback. It's an advanced reflection. You can reflect yourself. Consulting involves others. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, any organization action needs to take place in the form of a arc. We act, we reflect, we consult. In a deep manly voice, could you please read this? Yes.
Our task is to see things as they are, not as we are.
And one more time, Igor.
Our task is to see things as they are, not as we are.
This is a turning point. The greatest mistake is a mistake in perception, how we see the world. Therefore, again, as I say, the journey is inwards. It's about reflecting, first of all, on ourselves. So this is the world. This might be how we see the world. We need to see the world for as it is. Let it drop over the edge, I think. Yeah. Actually, be careful of the wind. Yeah. Actually, this is quite severe in. So there's a threshold. There's a turning point. We have to see the world for what it is, not as we are. There's a threshold that we cross, and when we cross that threshold, we enter a new world with new rules. And the new rules are as follows. Let me see. This here, as you can clearly see, is a cell. It's remarkably like an egg. It's a cell. Now, science has discovered, originally, that the nucleus of the cell was a very important part of the cell, right? What they've discovered these days is that the most important, the most intelligent, the most living aspect of the cell is the skin, the membrane. Because it is the skin that decides what should pass in and what should not. It is the skin that is the most important part. And when something passes in, it goes back to the nucleus, and the nucleus then again passes it out. If we consider this simple model, ladies and gentlemen, how are current organizations structured? Are they structured in this manner? Traditional organizations are structured top-down, where the guys at the top decide we should have a different flavor of cola. The alternative model is where it's not top-down or it's not bottom-up. Instead, it is actually a process of learning by doing. This structure is going to be facilitated by the work that you guys are doing using digital technology. Does this make sense? How excited are we? All right, watch the ink there, guys. That doesn't come out. So there's an Irish guy, and the Irish guy walks into a bar, and behind the bar were three of these things. Now, as you can clearly see, these three things are parrots. Right now, okay, look guys, they're Irish parrots. Right? Yeah, they're green, they're Irish parrots. This is what Irish parrots look like. It's true, it's true. Mark, you agree, yeah? Alright, so the Irish guy goes into the bar, and there's three parrots behind the bar, and the Irish guy says to the barman, "What's with the three parrots?" And the barman says, "Well, they're for sale." And the Irish guy says, "Really?" And he says, "Well, yeah, you can buy those." And he says, well, how much is it for the first one?" And the barman says, well, for the first one, it costs 1,000 euros. 1,000 euros? Well, what does he do? And he says, well, he talks. And sure enough, the parrot talks. Now, with a slight Irish accent. You know, he talks, right? And he says, okay, well, how much is it for the second parrot? And he says, well, the second parrot is 2,000 euros. 2,000 euros? What does he do? He says, well, he talks. And he dances. Universal symbol for dance. Right? So he's doing a little dance there now. And he says, well, how much is it for the third parrot? And he says, well, the third parrot, that's 5,000 euros. 5,000 euros. What does he do? And the barman says, I don't know. The other two call him boss. If you're not laughing at that, you might be a boss. Our organizational structures have changed. The individual is now potentially king. The individual now can change the system. It is no longer a case of where you have to be the king or the person that has all the money to make the change. You have one individual with a certain piece of technology, in your case, that changes the world. Our structures of leadership have changed. We are all now leaders. The best of times. The best of times. And there are three roles in which we play. Three roles. The first role that we play as a leader, actually, is simply as an individual. This is the first thing. The journey, first of all, is inwards. The second role that we play, once we're in leadership, we actually then interact with others. So the first role of leadership is an individual. The second role of leadership is interactions. And the third role of leadership is interactions of interactions, which really takes place within what I would call an institution. An institution is a large organization. It is many of the NGOs that we'll be working with. It is any large group of collected people. This would be a platform with a lot of different users, for example. Three different roles of leadership, all connected. We are operating on all three levels today. Never before in the history of the world has this happened. It is the best of times. Igor, please.
The quality of the investigation is defined by the quality of the investigator.
One more time, please.
The quality of the investigation is defined by the quality of the investigator.
The journey is inwards. In order to be that leader, we need, first of all, to reflect, to be present. This is where it begins. Gandhi would say, be the change you want in the world. Right? This is where it begins. New rules. Look at this. I love this story. There was an architect in America, and the architect was asked to build a university campus. And she came along and she built, you know, a usual series of structures that was pretty much satisfactory to most people. However, quite suddenly people realized that she didn't put down any paths between the building. Instead, she just planted grass. Soon what happened was paths were formed between the buildings, and some paths that she didn't realize. And after one semester, she then paved the paths as they were. She paved the paths. None of the paths were straight. This is the way we need to design. This is the way we need to operate. You can see similarities between this and Wikipedia. You get it? Open systems. We become facilitators more than dictators. Facilitating processes, which is what you guys are all about. So yes, how do we innovate? What do we focus on? This is the question. And as my greatest inspiration is from nature. And in nature, there are 3 levels. The first level in nature is what I call components. First level in nature is components. That's stuff, that's things. The second level in nature is where those things are connected. And the third level in nature is where the connections are within a greater context. Components, connections, context. This item here is a component. What did Apple do to connect that? They didn't take off their jacket, but they did something else. What did they do to connect that?
We gave it Wi-Fi.
Yes. And they created something called iTunes. iTunes is what Apple did to connect this component. What was the context then that Apple then further created with this? The cloud. The fact that it's a phone. All of these other items that are around the context of this. We're moving into a world, and as the professor has already highlighted this morning, everything is going to be connected to everything. It already is. We're going to make it visible. There's one more thing that I think is encouraging. And it's going to remind us of a sense of possibility. And that's as follows. If you have carbon, you've got hydrogen, and you've got oxygen. What does it create? Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It creates something here. What would that be? Sorry? To a certain extent, yes. Carbon, probably not, because that's really immaterial stuff.
Energy.
Energy, yeah. Definitely when you take enough of this stuff. Sugar. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen create sugar. Now, is there sugar in carbon? No. Is there sugar in hydrogen? No. Is there sugar in oxygen? No. Where does the sugar come from? Magic. It's the combination, or magic, or science will say, well, it's because they come together in a certain way, and so on and so on. There is an emergent quality that comes from this combination. Our task, and by the way, you're not sugar. You are oxygen. You are one of the components in this. And your task is to help create the right connections in order to create a sweet spot. Science uses the term a sweet spot. You could refer to a sweet spot as the tipping point in your usership. You could refer to a sweet spot as being that moment of where your platform takes on a new dynamic. Something emerges. And what happens from this is ego. Are we ready? In a deep manly voice.
By creating a culture of conversation, we create new knowledge.
Right. And one more time, please, sir.
By creating a culture of conversation, we create new knowledge.
Okay. What's going on in that image? Obviously, there's 3 Irish guys. Right. What's going on in the image? What do you see? This person is in conversation with this person. Get it? Right. You do not have point A in that. You don't even have point C in that. You don't even have point B in that. You just have a conversation. You see that? When he's in conversation with this person over here, you see that again, it's just another conversation. Similarly with this. Yet when they come together, there are 3 points that are formed. Those 3 points are the seed for new knowledge. What are you guys doing with your work? What you guys are doing with your work is the facilitation through digital technologies for the co-creation of knowledge. That's how I see what you guys are doing. You guys don't have the knowledge. You have the knowledge about how to get new knowledge. You see that? That's where I believe the skill of what you guys are doing. You're here, and what you're trying to do is create this ecology, this ecosystem. That is the sweet spot in what you guys are doing. You get it? Now, as we re-roll, you can now summarize this content and place it in the most useful way for you, because what you get is what they call a secret marriage. And the secret marriage is when me becomes we. That is the overall thing that you guys are doing. You're creating a sweet spot in the work that you're doing. You're creating from components the right connections to create a larger context, to create sweet spots. whoever you are is going to be what you create. Who are you? In my workshop a little bit later today, I'm going to be exploring how you do this. How do you create, even in real systems, systems as opposed to virtual, this is a real world, bricks and mortar. How do you create in any system the sweet spot that allows and encourages emergent qualities, sweet spots? As an individual, you work with others in interactions to create institutions, and institutions come back to serve individuals. Sweet spots. There's ways of doing that. Ways of doing that is where the collective is facilitated and a process of learning by doing takes place. That results in a world that is much richer than most of the assumptions we've currently worked with. And you will re-challenge your assumptions. Sorry. And it's a simple methodology. You see this part here? That is the me part. You can take an action and you can reflect on that action. The magic is when the we comes into that. You consult with others. That's the shift. You open it up. You open it up to allow others to create the paths. See that? The strategy for moving forward in any organization. Yes, and it's all about going inwards, guys. So, there are forces in the world that are pulling the world apart. So, the world is being broken up, and in many countries in the world, you see how the splits are happening. We've had the Arab Spring, and there's new developments that are taking place. And my advice is, let that happen. Your work is the real work, where you take that and you need to use those pieces to create new possibilities. This process here is the design process. The greatest design briefing I can give you is make the world a better place. The new mathematics, which is about exponential possibilities. In my idea of where you've got components, you connect those components, and then those components are connected into a larger context. Components, connections, context. What this means is there's a new type of science, that takes something that's happening, and in this case something natural like a butterfly, and science looks at it in context. It looks at it in the living system. It looks at it in the ecology. The time has passed for separation, analysis, categorization. And the time has opened for coming together, for synergy, for working as a collective whole, which will redefine this model, this limited model of competition. Because Darwin, do you remember Darwin, Charlie?
He was not Irish.
He wasn't Irish. Exactly. His only flaw. Charles Darwin comes along and he says, survival of the fittest. The battle of tooth and claw. And We've just taken that aspect of his thesis, unfortunately. Yet everything that he said was in a larger context of cooperation. Everything he said was in a larger context of cooperation. Nature does not continue to look for its, like an organism in nature never continues. There's only one organism in nature that does that keeps looking for itself, that keeps more and more and more, and it's called cancer. Everything else in nature has a limit. It grows, it develops, it changes to limit. Does a tree keep growing up? No. There is an unhealthy obsession in this frame of growth. A tree grows till it reaches a certain level, and then it bears fruit. This is the space for fruit. So, I'm approaching my 40 minutes, and I usually summarize everything I've said just on this one image. Before I do so, are there any burning questions? Because after this, there's no questions.
What's the name of the architect?
I don't know.
Who did the emergent
I don't know, actually.
Do you know the name of the campus?
No, no.
I've tried to verify that story and
Yeah.
I can't find any evidence
Yeah,
that it's true.
so this has been asked to me a few times before. Paul, where do you get your stories, right? And the
You
truth
come up
is,
with the 3 pairs,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. The truth is, like, the clever thing I usually say back is to say, I'm not interested in truthful stories. I'm interested in stories that have a truth. So I don't know if this really happened. I don't know who the architect was. What I do know is there's a truth in that. And I love that idea of working. I love that idea of an architect that traditionally is very stable, and my wife's an architect, right? And I know how they think. And if architects can open up into that, that's fantastic. Another question. Quickly.
So did your wife did she open up to that thinking?
Her philosophy of architecture is called architecting interaction. Check it out. Architecting interaction. We'll see what she does. One more question. Come on, burning question. Let. We're all clear? Yeah? Excellent. Let's summarize. So, by the way, everything that I just said now can be summarized into this. So, this is all you need to know. So, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. And in 14 minutes, this has been pretty much a sprint. So, there's a workshop, as I say, later that I'm going to go into more details. There are 3 roles that we play as leaders in today's world. The first role that we play is an individual. And the most important thing about being an individual is we check our perception. The journey is not forward or backward, the journey is inwards. We need to be the change we want to see in the world. The second role that we play as a leader is when we interact with others. And we do this on a daily basis. There is a quality of interaction here. And the quality of interaction is not based on competition. One of the challenges that I have with the competition-based model is that we're competing for the wrong thing. If we want to compete over how much we can collaborate. You get it? That's where our competition should be. So one of the questions that I'm going to have for you guys is, you guys are all presenting, and yes, there's going to be different varieties of winner, which I think is a healthy thing. Now, how do you guys collaborate? How do you guys help each other? How do you go beyond the competition-based model? This aspect of interactions is essential as we move forward. And the better you are at this, the better you're going to be at this, which is the 3rd level of leadership, which is based on institutions. Individuals interactions, institutions. An institution is a connection of connections. That's where you work with more and more people. So this is you partnering to create your app, and that's you doing a hackathon. You get it? And then it comes back again to the individual. You see this? So, what do we focus on? What do we create? And what we create, first of all, are components. As an individual, we usually create components. The second thing that we do, particularly when we're working with others, is we create connections between those components. And the third thing that we do is we connect the connections to create a context. You'll note that the individual is usually going towards the component first. Working with others, there becomes connections. In the institutions, it becomes more of a context. You see, it's richer. So the more rich is based on the number of interactions that we have. And, as you guys now know, what you need to do is you need to take an action. You then need to reflect on that action, and then you need to consult about what you've done. You see that? You act, you get a reflection, you consult. So too in your interactions. You take an action, which is usually about connecting things, you get a reflection back, and then you consult with the larger group. So you consult with a larger institution. The institution takes an action, which is usually around the context. They get a reflection on that. And then the institution consults. With who? Other institutions? No! You consult with individuals. It has to come back to the individual. The individual is the skin, not the nucleus. You see that? And what I believe is going to happen when you do this is you guys are going to create a variety of platforms where you yourself collaborate with others to create a rich context. And I believe that when you do that, you're going to create a unique sweet spot that's going to make the world a better place. Thank you very much.